Imagine stepping into a world where the quietest moments hold the deepest truths. This is a story not of grand confrontations or dramatic revelations. Before I unfold the rest of this night, take a second to hit like and subscribe. It really does help more than you know, and if you're drawn into stories like this, I want you here for every one of them. Also tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Are you in a small town where the evenings fall slow and gentle, or in a city where the lights never quite go dark? It began on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind where the sun dips behind rooftops, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, and the air carries that soft, almost imperceptible chill that whispers winter is coming. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, scrolling through my phone, trying to ignore the familiar tension in my chest that had been lingering all week. My dad, James, knocked gently before opening the door. "Hey, Lily," he said, using the nickname only he ever used. His voice was softer than usual. "Want to go for a drive?" I blinked at him, unsure. Our drives were rare these days. James had always been the quiet type, calm, meticulous, a man who measured his words and often kept them tucked away like treasured possessions. The idea of him inviting me out of the house, especially in the dark, sparked a mix of curiosity and unease in me. "Ah, sure," I said after a pause, my voice sounding stranger to my own ears than I expected. He gave me a small smile that seemed almost nervous, which only deepened my curiosity. We left the house quietly, the familiar creak of the garage door opening, blending with the soft hum of the evening. James's old sedan was waiting, its paint faded but polished, reflecting the dim street lights like quiet stars on the pavement. I slid into the passenger seat, buckled in, and watched him start the car with that methodical patience he always had, like he was setting a slow, deliberate rhythm for the night ahead. We drove in silence at first, the kind of silence that feels heavy but not uncomfortable, the kind that holds possibility. The streets were mostly empty, and the occasional passing headlights cast fleeting shadows across our faces. I glanced at him, really looked at him, and noticed the way his hands gripped the steering wheel, not tightly, just deliberately, almost like he was anchoring himself. There was a thoughtfulness in his expression that I rarely saw, a quiet intensity that made me feel like the world outside was nothing more than a blurred backdrop to this moment between us. "Where are we going?" I asked, breaking the silence, though I didn't really expect an answer. James cleared his throat, eyes still on the road. "Nowhere specific," he said. "I just wanted to talk, you and me alone." I nodded, feeling a strange flutter of anticipation mixed with apprehension. I knew something was coming, something important, but I didn't know what. The city lights gradually gave way to quieter roads lined with tall, shadowy trees. The air smelled faintly of pine and wet earth, a scent that always reminded me of childhood camping trips we used to take. The memory was bittersweet, and I realized I hadn't felt this connected to him in a long time. Finally, he pulled over to the side of a small overlook where the road curled around the edge of a hill. Below, the city sprawled like a sea of tiny, flickering lights. We sat there in silence for a moment, just listening to the gentle whisper of the wind through the trees and the distant hum of traffic. "I've been thinking," he started, his voice low, almost hesitant, "about a lot of things, about us, about mistakes, and about time." My heart thumped in my chest. There it was, the feeling I had been trying to ignore, the sense that this drive wasn't just a casual outing, that something he had carried for years was finally going to be shared. "Me?" I asked softly, not wanting to break the fragile weight of the moment. He nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, you, and about me too, about being a father and sometimes not being the man I wanted to be." I felt the first of tears, not from sadness alone, but from the vulnerability in his voice. It was rare to hear him like this, open, unguarded, human. I reached out instinctively and touched his arm, and he gave a tiny, almost imperceptible squeeze back. That small gesture spoke volumes, more than words ever could. "I don't know how to say this without it sounding wrong," he continued, his voice catching slightly. "But there are things I wish I had told you sooner about who I am, about the choices I've made, about love and fear, and everything in between." My stomach twisted. This was more than a confession. It was a bridge being built across years of quiet distance. And though I didn't know the details yet, I felt a shift inside me, a recognition that the man beside me, my dad, was revealing a depth I had never allowed myself to see before. For the first time in a long time, the world outside felt distant. The city lights below, the trees around us, the wind brushing against the car. They all became background to a more profound connection. My dad was letting me in, and for the first time I realized that the person I thought I knew so well had layers I hadn't yet discovered. And in that moment, I understood that whatever he was about to confess, it would change the way I saw him, and perhaps the way I saw myself. The wind was cooler now, carrying a crisp edge that hinted at the coming winter. I hugged my knees to my chest, sitting on the passenger seat of my dad's old sedan. The city lights below like a constellation scattered across the valley. James's hands rested on the steering wheel, and for a long moment, we just sat there. Two figures caught between silence and something unsaid. The kind of silence that's heavy but necessary, like the air itself is holding its breath, waiting. "I'm not sure how to start," he admitted finally, his voice quieter than before, almost swallowed by the night. "I've carried this for a long time, thinking I could protect you from it, or maybe thinking I was protecting myself." I felt my heart tighten. There was a seriousness in his tone I had never heard before, one that made my chest ache in anticipation. I wanted to speak to ask what he meant, but my voice felt too small, too insignificant in the gravity of the moment. So I waited, letting him gather his thoughts, letting the pause stretch longer than it had any right to. "Do you remember when you were little, Lily?" he asked, not looking at me, eyes fixed on the horizon. "The camping trips we used to take, I know you do. You love those trips more than anything." I nodded, the memories flooding back with vivid clarity. The crackling fire, the smell of damp pine needles, the stars so bright they seemed to pulse against the night sky. "Of course," I said softly. "You and Mom, you made those trips magical. I remember feeling like the world was only ours for a little while." He let out a small, almost humorless laugh. "Yes, magical, but I wasn't always the father you deserved on those trips. There were moments when I wasn't brave enough to face my own fears, and I pushed you and your mother away without even realizing it." My stomach churned. The man sitting beside me, the man who had always been the quiet anchor in my life, was unraveling in a way I hadn't expected. I reached out, instinctively resting my hand on his. He glanced at me, and for the first time I saw something raw in his eyes. Regret, but also hope, a yearning to be understood. "Dad, what do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, though I tried to steady it. He inhaled slowly as if preparing to release a burden he had carried for decades. "I was young, Lily. I had my own fears, my own mistakes. I thought I could shield you from them. But in trying to protect you, I think I ended up keeping myself from you, from really being present, from showing you who I really am." The words settled around me like fallen leaves, soft yet impossible to ignore. I felt a mix of sadness, confusion, and a surprising warmth. It was strange, this closeness we were creating, born out of vulnerability and honesty. "I've always seen you as strong, Lily," he continued, his eyes now meeting mine. "And I've been proud of you in ways I never said out loud. But I've also been scared. Scared of losing you, scared of failing as your father, scared of all the things I can't fix. And that fear, it made me quiet. It made me distant." I swallowed hard, feeling tears threaten to spill over. "Dad, I never realized you felt the T-way," I whispered. "I always thought, I don't know, that you had it all figured out, that you didn't have doubts." He shook his head, a small, almost embarrassed smile tugging at his lips. "No, Lily, I don't have it all figured out. And maybe I never will, but I want to try. I want to be better for you, for us. I don't want my regrets to define our relationship anymore." There was a vulnerability in him that cut through the years of assumptions I had made about him. I had always seen my dad as stoic, composed, almost untouchable. But now I realized that beneath that exterior, he was profoundly human. He was someone capable of fear, love, and growth, just like me. "I never thought about it that way," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I've always loved you, Dad, but I guess I never imagined you had fears like mine. I didn't know you needed me to understand you too." His hand moved to cover mine, warm and reassuring. "We all need to be seen, Lily, even fathers." We sat there for a long time, talking in fragments, in hesitant sentences, in silences filled with understanding. I shared moments from my life, my own insecurities, the small heartbreaks, the dreams I had been too afraid to voice. And he listened, really listened, without judgment or interruption. There was a tenderness in his attention, a kind of quiet respect that made me feel seen, truly seen for the first time in a way that mattered. The city lights below flickered as if acknowledging the connection forming above them. I realized then that this night, this drive wasn't just about his confession, it was about us discovering each other anew, about bridging the gap between generations with honesty and love. Finally, he broke the silence again. I don't want tonight to be the last time we do this, Lily. Not just the talking, but the understanding. I want you to know that I'll always be here trying, learning, and loving you. That's all I can promise. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I want that too, Dad. I want us to keep discovering each other, even when it's hard. And in that moment, I felt an unfamiliar but comforting sense of hope. A hope that despite the mistakes, the silence, and the fear, we could find our way to each other. Not just as father and daughter, but as two people willing to face the truth and grow together. The night stretched on, the wind whispering secrets through the trees, the stars holding their quiet vigil. And I knew deep down that I would never forget this night. The night my dad's confession shook me, but also built a bridge of trust and love that would carry us forward. The days after that night drive felt strange, almost suspended in a quiet reverence. Life had gone on. School, chores, the endless hum of social media. But something in me had shifted. Every time I saw my dad, James, I noticed the small gestures that used to go unnoticed. The way he sipped his coffee slowly in the mornings, eyes distant yet somehow present. The way he hummed under his breath while tinkering in the garage, the small creases around his eyes that deepened when he smiled. It was like seeing him for the first time, peeling away layers I hadn't known existed. I found myself replaying his words over and over like a melody I couldn't get out of my head. Even fathers need to be seen. That line struck me harder than anything else. All my life I thought he was unshakable, that his silence meant strength. Now I understood that his quietness was often his way of carrying burdens alone, and I realized I had been guilty too. I had assumed he didn't need my understanding, my empathy, when in truth he had been longing for it. A few days later, I decided to invite him out again. Not for a confession this time, not for some heavy conversation, but just to be together, to breathe in the same space without the weight of the past pressing down on us. "Want to go to the park tonight?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter as he chopped vegetables for dinner. He paused, knife midair, and looked at me with a faint smile. "The park at night?" "Yes," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Just a walk. I want to talk, but I don't want it to feel like a lecture or a therapy session, just you and me." He nodded slowly, and I saw the same cautious anticipation in his eyes that I had noticed on the drive. "All right," he said, setting the knife down. "I'd like that." That evening, the air was crisp, the kind that makes your cheeks tingle and your lungs fill with clarity. We walked side by side along the winding path of the park, the streetlights casting pools of soft golden light on the gravel beneath our feet. It was quieter than I remembered, the usual bustle of evening joggers replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves in the trees. "I've been thinking about that night," I said after a long pause, breaking the silence that was comfortable rather than awkward. "About everything you told me, and I guess I wanted to say thank you for trusting me, for letting me in." James's gaze softened and he nodded, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. "Thank you for listening, Lily. That means more than I can say. I've wanted to tell you for so long, but I wasn't sure how or if it was even my place." "It was your place," I assured him. "It still is. I think it always will be." But I hesitated, unsure how to voice the jumble of emotions inside me. "I also realized that I've been holding back from you in my own way, afraid of being too much, too emotional, or too, needy." He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. The glow from the lamppost above him made his features look softer, more open. "Lily, you could never be too much. Never." The sincerity in his voice struck me. It was as if he had finally dismantled the walls that had separated us for so many years, inviting me to step into the space he had created with honesty and love. I felt a warmth spread through me, a combination of relief, affection, and a strange exhilaration. This was the first time I realized that our relationship wasn't about perfection. It was about understanding, acceptance, and mutual respect. We continued walking, and as we did, we shared stories we hadn't spoken aloud before. I told him about my first heartbreak, the one that left me crying into my pillow for hours, and he told me about a regret from his own youth, a mistake that had haunted him silently for decades. The more we talked, the more I noticed the similarities between us, the fears, the insecurities, the desire to do right by the people we loved. It was humbling to realize how connected we were, not just by blood, but by the shared humanity that bound us together. At one point, we found a small wooden bench overlooking a quiet pond. The water mirrored the dim glow of the lamplight, creating a gentle shimmer that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of our conversation. We sat down, shoulders brushing lightly, and I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known I could experience with him. "I think," he said slowly, "that we're both learning how to be seen in our own ways. And maybe that's what matters. Not the mistakes, not the regrets, but the willingness to try again, to be open, to understand one another." I nodded, my eyes tracing the ripples across the water. "I think you're right, Dad, and I think I want to try too. Not just to understand you, but to be honest with myself about my own fears and feelings." He reached over and squeezed my hand, a quiet affirmation that no words could match. "We'll do it together, Lily, step by step." For the first time in a long time, I felt a real sense of partnership with my father. Not the one-sided dynamic I had assumed existed for so long, but a mutual respect and understanding that made me feel rooted, safe, and seen. And as we sat there watching the water shimmer and listening to the soft rustle of leaves, I realized that this night, like the one before, was another turning point. Not because of some dramatic revelation, but because of the quiet, steady connection we were building piece by piece. I also realized that understanding my father meant understanding myself, that the fears I held, the doubts, the hesitations weren't weaknesses, but opportunities to grow, and that perhaps the most profound discoveries weren't the shocking confessions or dramatic revelations, but the small, quiet moments of honesty, empathy, and love that allowed us to see each other fully. As we walked back toward the car, the path dimly lit by the overhead lamps, I felt a strange mixture of melancholy and hope. The past was full of silence, mistakes, and distance, but the present, shared night, this openness, was full of possibility. And I knew with a certainty I had never felt before that our relationship would never be the same again. It was no longer just father and daughter. It was two human beings learning how to navigate life together, discovering strength in vulnerability, and finding joy in simply being present for one another. The days following our walk in the park carried a quiet kind of magic. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else. But to me the air felt lighter, the house warmer, and even the silence between my dad and me no longer seemed heavy or loaded with unspoken words. It was as if the honesty we shared had lifted a weight neither of us realized we'd been carrying for years. One Saturday evening, James came into my room holding 2 steaming mugs of cocoa. His hair was slightly tousled, and there was a faint smile that reached his eyes. The kind of smile that seemed to say, "I've been waiting for this moment too." "Hey, Lily," he said gently, placing one of the mugs on my desk. "Thought we could sit out on the porch tonight, just the 2 of us." I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. There was something sacred about these invitations, moments where ordinary routines became extraordinary simply because of the presence of someone who truly wanted to connect. The porch was quiet except for the distant hum of evening traffic and the occasional chirp of a late bird settling in for the night. James and I wrapped ourselves in blankets and sat side by side, mugs in hand, steam curling upward in delicate spirals. The sky above was a canvas of stars, each one seeming brighter than the night before, as if reflecting the small, persistent light that had grown between us. "I've been thinking about our talks," I began, turning slightly to look at him, "about how you've shared so much of yourself and how it's made me see things differently about you and about me." He nodded, taking a slow sip from his mug. "I think that's the beauty of it, Lily. Understanding isn't a one-way street. We reflect each other, we grow together." I smiled softly. I used to think being strong meant hiding fears, keeping emotions tucked away. But now I see that strength can be in being open, in trusting someone enough to let them see your true self, flaws and all. James's eyes glimmered with quiet pride. That's exactly right, Lily. It takes courage to be seen, and it takes courage to let someone else in without judgment. We sat in silence for a while, letting the words sink in, letting the quiet wrap around us like a protective blanket. It was one of those rare moments where time seemed suspended, where past regrets, present fears, and future uncertainties melted into a simple, profound understanding. Then, almost without realizing it, we began talking about lighter things. The absurdity of my attempts at cooking, his failed attempts at assembling furniture, memories from my childhood that had us both laughing until our sides ached. There was a rhythm to our conversation, a balance between seriousness and levity that made me feel as if the walls between us had dissolved entirely. At one point, James reached over and gently nudged my shoulder. "You know, Lily, I've always been proud of you, but I don't think I told you enough." I shook my head, smiling, feeling warmth spread through me. "I know, Dad, and now I get it. Pride doesn't need to be spoken all the time. It's in the little moments, the time we spend together, the trust we share. And I'm proud of you, too, for being brave enough to let me in." He looked at me, really looked at me with an intensity that made my chest swell. "Thank you, Lily. That means everything." The stars above twinkled as if acknowledging our bond. And I realized then that the emotional journey we had been on wasn't about a single confession or a dramatic revelation. It was about patience, empathy, and the slow cultivation of trust. It was about showing up for each other consistently, even when the past had been distant or the future uncertain. Later, as we sat quietly sipping our cocoa, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned. Life wasn't perfect, and people weren't flawless. My dad had made mistakes, I had made mistakes, and there were still fears and insecurities lurking in the shadows. But what mattered was the willingness to confront those fears, to speak honestly, and to hold space for each other's humanity. I realized that the bond between a parent and child wasn't static. It evolved, deepened, and matured as both people grew. And that night, with the stars above and the gentle hum of life around us, I felt an unshakable sense of gratitude. Gratitude for my dad, for his honesty, and for the newfound closeness we had forged through shared vulnerability. "Dad," I whispered, leaning slightly against his shoulder, "thank you for trusting me, for showing me that it's okay to be imperfect, to be human, and for letting me be me." James turned slightly, resting his cheek briefly against mine. "Thank you too, Lily, for listening, for understanding, for loving me, even when I struggled to show it." The warmth between us wasn't just physical, it was emotional, the kind of deep, grounding comfort that made the world outside seem both softer and infinitely richer. And as I looked out at the night sky, I realized that while confessions could shake the ground beneath us, understanding, empathy, and love could build something far stronger, a bridge that would carry us through the uncertainties of life together. By the time we went back inside, the night had deepened, quiet and gentle. I felt lighter, not because the world had changed, but because my relationship with my father had. We had discovered each other anew, and in doing so, I had discovered something about myself. That connection, vulnerability, and mutual respect were the truest forms of strength. And in that quiet, unassuming way that life sometimes does, I knew that this was only the beginning of a chapter where our bond, tested and healed, would continue to grow, anchored in trust, love, and the courage to be seen. That night, I fell asleep with a sense of peace I hadn't known in years, the echoes of our laughter and conversation lingering like a gentle promise. And I realized with a smile that sometimes the most unexpected drives lead to the most profound journeys, not across the landscape, but into the heart of those we love most.